throughout Australia. 3AW is football.
Umpire said play on Dixon, round the body for a goal.
The Doggies look really dangerous.
They need a goal just to steady the Swans.
Pick and round the body, he goes for a goal.
This is breaking up a bit, this game, Tony.
To Nick Smith. He knows how to kick the ball, and the defender drives it home.
To Kennedy, this to put them in front, puts them in front. He's done it.
That's where it's being won. In the clinches here, 9-3 in the last 8 minutes. Dogs haven't scored.
Front of the Pat Kennedy, round the body for another one. What a game Josh Kennedy's having.
Gee, it's an amazing game of football.
Out the back, Mitchell, the snap from the pack. The snap is brilliant from Mitchell. Over the shoulder, McLean. Goal to the Dogs. It's a 2-point game at half-time, 45-43, 7-3 to 7-1. Sydney has it. Before we go into our wrap, Matthew Richardson caught up with Kieran Jack, and we thank Channel 7.
Kieran, you'd be frustrated with that last goal, but it was a good turnaround from halfway through that second quarter.
Yeah, it was. Our boys bounced back. Should have even the numbers up around the ball. If we can do that, we can put some heat on them in their forward line.
You'd be very happy. Midfield goals, 4 out of Mitchell and Kennedy.
Yeah, good start from them. Hopefully they can do it again second half.
Okay, thanks, Kieran.
Short and sweet, as you would expect, half-time on grand final day. It's a 2-point margin to the Sydney Swans. Each half-time report brought to you by Sportsbet right throughout the year. The new Sportsbet multi-builder. It's the easiest way to put on a multi. Download the app. Gamble responsibly. Sam, Matthew, Tony, take it away.
Let's go through the major ball winners, Matthew Lloyd and Tony Shaw. Josh Kennedy's been epic, 22 disposals and 2 goals to his name. If he's not best on ground, he's very close so far. Daniel Hannabury, 17. Kieran Jack with 17. Tom Mitchell's had a superb game, 16 disposals and 2 goals. Jason Johannesson leading the way for the Pups with 18. Matthew Boyd with 15. Liberatore, Picken and McRae all have 13 disposals. 189 touches to 185, so it's very close, Lloydo, and 25 inside 50s to 23. But you picked up on it halfway through the first quarter. Clearly, it is the clearances which is the barometer of how this game is being won. 14-7 in that second quarter in the way of Sydney.
Yeah, I think it is. I thought the Dogs first quarter beat Sydney at their own game, that inside game, and if they beat the Swans there, well then I think their strength on the outside gets Sydney. But Sydney, when Picken kicked that goal, they went out to, I think, a 15, 16-point lead. And it was then when Sydney players, Isaac Heaney, Tony Shaw spoke of, I thought Zach Jones, Kennedy, who has been the best man on the ground, lifted. And they just kept getting the ball forward. And the Bulldogs didn't score for 15 minutes while the Sydney Swans kicked 4 goals, Shorey, in that game. So I think I want to ask you about Franklin, though, Shorey. Just the way they've played him today, in hindsight, at the start of the game, you might have thought, OK, he can get Hamling. But the biggest weakness of Buddy Franklin is his physicality in the marking contest. Yet it's played into the hands of Hamling, with just Buddy having 6 disposals to half-time.
And Hamling's done it well because he's had a player in front of him, either Easton Wood, just playing in front, or Morris, and he's also played in front of Buddy, so he's not worried about him pushing him under the ball, maybe because it lacked a bit of penetration to get it real deep in their forward line. But yeah, you're right. Look, you bring Buddy up the ground, see what Hamling, they'll probably change over Hamling and someone else will take care of Buddy, but you've got to get him into the game somehow. But, you look also to the Western Bulldogs. Stringer hasn't had an impact. Daniel's only had 3 possessions. Cordy's only had 4. So both forward lines have got a lot of chance to improve. The one thing that was bad, though, is that when they won the clearance, Sydney, they kicked 4 goals in a row. To do that again in the second half, you won't get back against Sydney again. But they did really well, the Doggies, early part of it. They're kicking inside 50. If they were to lose this game, they'll look back on it and think, gee, that first half, our disposal inside 50 to find targets was pretty poor.
This is the halftime wrap thanks to Sportsbet. AFL Grand Final Day, halftime, Sydney with a slender 2-point lead, 7-3-45 to the Western Bulldogs, 7-1-43, sitting alongside 1990 Premiership captain and Norm Smith medalist Tony Shaw, the man who kicked 926 goals for the Essendon Footy Club, Matthew Lloyd. Lloydie, a couple of players need to lift. Shorey mentioned about Jake Stringer, Kurt Tippett as well, who's been so vital to Sydney really all year. Only 3 disposals, barely been cited.
Yeah, that's why I would push Franklin up, and I would go to Kurt Tippett at now and say, you've been a star in your own right. I've seen you monster games, and he hasn't done it for a while, but I would love to see Kurt Tippett play deep and get the one-on-one contest, and Lance Franklin go up and be like another midfielder half forward. I think that'd be a real weapon for them.
Also the best in the business for all things medical, Dr. Peter Larkins. Doc, Franklin probably the most noteworthy name that's come to the bench. What's the latest?
Yeah, well, obviously the first quarter we saw him off with an ankle. He just twisted the ankle, and but he seemed a bit distracted at quarter time again, went downstairs for a second lot of treatment and strapping. And he's obviously been up and about and mobile. We've caught him in that action pretty dramatic in the last 15 minutes of the second quarter. So I don't think that's the sort of injury that is going to have a big impact on him. It's still just that pain that they've managed, and they'll be talking to him again just to see if he needs any more work on that. So that's not going to slow him down. I mean, Johannessen's the one who's got the calf strain, and he's not... I mean, he's had a bit of a dash. We know that he's a running defender, but he's been off the ground. Well, I think McVeigh certainly looks off the pace, and Mills has got really heavy strapping on that right hamstring as well. So as Petit comes on in the game, both McVeigh and Mills, I'll be watching him closely, Scoop, just to see, because they've both come in with soft tissue doubts and heavily strapped, so that means they're not right to go. But Buddy, the one I think they'll probably manage his ankle through the game.
Heading towards the end of the halftime wrap, let's get a quick prediction at halftime from Lloydie and Shorey. Shorey, let's start with you.
Oh, look, I think for the Bullies to be in this game at this level and at this stage, and we think we know about football, I find it very hard because both these sides are miles ahead of a lot of other teams that play the game. I'll go with the Bullies just because they've hung in there for this long, and their speed. If they get it open and break it open and get out without that lack of pressure, you can't pressure that for the second half all the time. I'll just go the Bullies in a very tight one though.
I was very confident on the Swans before the game. Not so confident now because I think the Dogs have shown a few weaknesses in the Swans in terms of their pace, but I'll stick with it. Franklin, 6 possessions. I expect him to lift and they can just win the Swans.
Tone, just before the grand final sprint, the goal kickers, Kennedy and Mitchell, both have 2 for the Swans. Singles to Parker, Nick Smith and Gary Rowan. And for the Western Bulldogs, 2 goals each to Tora Dixon and Tom Boyd. Singles to Pickin, McLean and Zane Cordy.
Thank you very much. You're in the middle of the halftime report for Sportsbet's multi-builder. Always gamble responsibly, as the boys are all set to do the half-time dash. And I'm just looking at those. The boys have still kept themselves very good, Nick.
Yes.
Given that, Sam, that they have not basically had to play there, a bit of a break at least for some of them. I'm not going to try and call it.
I reckon, Tone, the 2 favourites are going to have to be Majak Dor and Anthony McDonald-Tipungwuti, Shorey.
Yes, he can go.
Just on the surface, look to be the 2 quickest.
One of the Jetters in there? I thought you said Lewis Jett. No, he's not
Lewis Jetto is certainly running for the West Coast Eagles, but looks like he hasn't made the final. Liam Sumner in there for Carlton. Is it Dylan Robertson, Beaver, for the Saints?
Darcy Tucker for the Fremantle Dockers. James Rose for the Sydney Swans. Jed Buse for Geelong.
Buse, yep.
So they're the runners out there at the moment.
So we would love them to start in but a matter of moments. That's half-time in the big stuff. Sydney 7-3-45, the Dogs 7-1-43. And while I love Jimmy Shelter as much as the next person, you just want to get this half-time dash underway as the blokes do some high kicks.
Are you going to call it, Tone? It's almost like Tim Lane at the Olympics calling Kathy Freeman.
Yeah, except it's the one that never gets to wear with Tim Lane. He gets his right all the time. I most certainly do not. So we're just waiting for this 100-metre sprint. No, I'll tell you what we'll do, boys. We'll just give you the result.
Yeah,
I'll cod something else. Relays, if you would.
I was never into the sprint, Tone. I don't know why.
You're never that quick.
Exactly. That's why I was never into it.
Tone, you've got a kindred soul sitting in front of you. It's a 2-point margin to the Sydney Swans. Relays, if you'd like to clear your commitments and rejoin us in 5 minutes' time. For those staying with us, let's head to the 3AW newsroom. And it's a very good afternoon to Alicia Byrne.
Throughout Australia, this is 3AW's live coverage of the 2016 AFL Finals Series.
5 minutes to 4 o'clock. Welcome back to the MCG. What a magnificent game we have. Sydney, the nose in front, but only barely. 7-3-45. The Dogs 7-1-43. 2-point margin to the Sydney Swans, 45-43. Footy finals on 3AW for Don Footy Franks. Don is good, is wonderful. To all of our friends listening right throughout WA, through 6PR, through 5AA in Adelaide, through 2UE in Sydney, Magic 882 Brisbane, and Relays picking us all up. It's great that you are part of this wonderful day as Sydney hold an edge by 2 points, and an uneasy calm sort of coming over the crowd as I look at the moment, Tone, with the clouds starting just to roll in, and who's to say there may not be a little bit of rain between now and the conclusion, but everything that one side's thrown at the other, they've been able to match, which makes it the most fantastic, at least an anticipated fantastic second half.
Oh, well, look, there's nothing worse than a side, being 50 points up at half-time in the grand final. You know what's coming, Tony. So this is brilliant. Both these sides just gone head-to-head. I just watched Johnny Longmire. He was talking to Buddy Franklin, and I'll be thinking, he's just saying, OK, if this happens in the game, we want you to roll up the ground. If this happens in the game, you take one or two. If they play him deep again early in this quarter, and he takes a couple of marks, well, what they were trying to go with at the start of the game, he then goes, we keep rolling with that. So they've got a couple of options there, but this might come down to some of the stars, or a couple of stars who haven't had an impact in this first quarter, as we said, with Tippett and Jake Stringer. We know he can kick 3 goals very quickly, so it might just come down to that.
Matthew, you've been following Jake Stringer's progress, as you would, throughout the finals campaign. Are you able to identify anything? It doesn't look like he's a happy footballer.
No, I think that I spoke to someone at the airport about him when he got dropped a number of weeks ago, and I said, can't believe he's still not in the side. And they said he's got here on raw talent, and after you have one good season like he did last year, the competition starts to study you a bit more, and Jake Stringer was getting a lot of balls out the back, and he now needs to look at a player like Nick Revolt. He'll never be the type of player Nick is, but Nick is so hard to stop because he makes 3 leads, he keeps coming up at the ball, and the hardest players to stop are the ones that come up at the ball. Stringer sort of is that player that likes to stay inside 50, run back towards goal, and then he got into some bad habits. So for me, he's not going to kick 4 in this second half, Tone, but he's got to keep Rampy occupied and give off handballs, create a couple, try and kick a couple himself. He's kicked 8 goals in his last 7 games, so you can't expect him to kick a bag in the second half.
Norm Smith Medal, Tone, is awarded to the best of field. We've got our own best of field for Vic Super, the super fund for all Victorians, and you can get super active with Vic Super. If the votes stop now, does Kennedy have the medal around his neck?
Oh, I think he'd have it by a mile, but I think Naismith's been really good too, and I think Tommy Mitchell had a really good second quarter.
What about for the Dogs? Who is the Dogs' best player at the moment? Is it Dal House?
Oh, yeah, he's had his 13. Matty Boyd's been pretty good across half-back. Joe Hannison, he's had his 18 possessions. He's turned the ball over a bit, though, Tim, a couple of times going forward, and that's the thing.
If the Dogs win, Joel Hamling, would he be coming to consideration?
Well, if he holds Buddy, yeah.
Goalless, and they win?
You've got it.
Lloydie, can I ask you about Josh Kennedy? Because you spoke about how important the clearances have been in this game, and he's clearly the king of that, and 22 to spot. Is there anyone that, even if Luke Beveridge wanted to, that he could send to Josh Kennedy to try to nullify his impact around the clearances?
Oh, they've got a lot of, I think, say for a guy like Liberatore, he might not be big enough for him, but I look at a guy like Josh Dunkley, he's only had a handful of disposals too. I know he hasn't got the experience, but someone who can just, they're not going to stop him from getting the ball, but to stop the amount of quality clearances he gets. That's what they do with Dangerfield. They don't try and stop him from getting 30. They'll try and stop the quality of them, and that's what someone's got to do around stoppages against Josh Kennedy. Maybe it's Bontempelli, who hasn't had the biggest half either.
Well, they've been playing head-to-head. You've got to roll the Bont on, though, because the Bont can do to you. I just say go head-to-head, but if it sort of gets out of hand, we've got to cut down really quick and go, stop him. You've got to pick that as an individual player.
Well, with Jake Stringer, I want to get back there because we've seen his match-winning capabilities. It's not working for him up forward. He got some vital touches last week. I know that the facile throwaway is throw him into the middle, but what do you do?
I just think he's got to scrap this out, bite it out, because I just think Zane Cordy, Tone, is just too light a body, 11-game player. They take Stringer out of there. Well, I just worry about Grundy and Rampy and Mills and all these guys just laying off all the time. So he's just got to come up with the ball and be hard to play on, Tone.
For Vic Super, we'll be doing our best to field, obviously, later in the day. However, for the Sage Institute of Fitness, they bring us the injury report at ground level each and every Saturday, Sunday, Friday. You can trust Sage to kickstart your fitness career. sagefitness.edu.au. Doc, we're 2 minutes away from the recommencement. The Sydney Swans by 2 points. Your professional assessment as best you can, please.
Yeah, well, just in terms of fitness, Tony, look, just in the last 10 minutes of that second quarter, the players coming off the ground, I look to see who's fatigued, who's working hard. They usually mean they're chasing, just as the big lights are coming on as I speak to you, Tim. Sorry, Tony. And I thought Sydney looked a little bit more fatigued. Maybe that's because they're working hard. Obviously, both sides are. But Buddy Franco with his ankle, he's right to go. Johanneson's got to get through. And as I said over the half-time break, both Mills, who's coming to the bench at the moment, McVeigh, who's starting in the ground on defence, they will get only more likely to have a recurrence of their soft tissue injury. So the Bulldogs in the greater position, but we know what Sydney can bring in terms of pressure, and that's what the Dogs have to sustain.
Before Tim Lane, final word to you, Shorey.
Oh, look, I picked the Swans to win by 10 points prior to the game, but I'm just turning that around now. I thought the Bullies, if they're in this position, I think they might outrun them, but look, if you think you... I don't know. If you think we know what we're going to find in the second half, it is a great contest and exactly what grand final pressure football's about.